Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Drainage, waterproofing, synthetic stucco, Nudura concrete forms. Man, they've got all kinds of cutting-edge technologies. Plus, they've got the reputation of a 100 and I think now 3-year-old company. You're not going to beat that. In terms of track record, of history, of happy clientele, and then you throw in all this stuff that makes your next project stronger, safer, more energy efficient, more cost efficient. Oh, please. You're not going to get that in any big box store around here. A.G. Hines Company. That's where you start. That's where you finish your do-it-yourself projects if you're an East Tennessean. It's what your granddaddy did. That's what your great-granddaddy did. aghines.com to learn more. All right. The man laughing, always I pay him to chuckle, is Chuck Cavaleris right here, longtime media member, longtime member of our panel. Chuck, thanks for being with us.
Hey, great to be here.
Adam Sparks, I'm giving him a lot of plugs today, again to the News Sentinel. He said that UT would appeal if a bowl ban is thrown at them. And while that would drag things out, that makes sense. We talked last week, there have been people saying Tennessee would take the NCAA to court. We all kind of poo-pooed that last week. Now it's being said, well, it's an appeal. Well, yeah, that's within the NCAA process. I have no doubt they probably would appeal, but my fear would be, Chuck, if you've gone through this and you didn't expect to be hit with a failure to monitor, which would result in bigger scholarship productions, but you got it. And then you said, well, we're going to go to a hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not going to settle. We're going to go to a hearing and fight that. And they come back and they still do it. So that's twice you've lost on this argument, basically. What good does an appeal do if you're doing it right back in front of the NCAA, other than drag it back out?
Unless you can dig up some kind of precedent that shows
With the NCAA?
With the
Yeah.
NCAA,
Good luck.
and good luck. I mean, good luck with that. The more to me, Tennessee spent $1 million to build a case against itself to hand over to the NCAA
To save $12 million.
Yeah. So to me, it's like this. Even if you appeal, and you want to do that, but that means that this drags out another 3 years or so, if not more. So I mean, I don't know. We just got to see how it plays out. But I don't know what good it would do.
If you pay your attorneys were $1.5 million, all right, and you get a $10 million fine, I'm going to stick with $10 million. That's 11.5, and you save 12 from Pruitt. You're even. That's good. I'm back to my 10 million. 10 million's fine, Jimmy. But here's the thing: this Pruitt deal. All right, if it's 40 scholarships, which I don't think it's going to be, let's say it's 20 scholarships. 20 scholarships would be steep. That would hurt. And you've been. How much has this hurt you in recruiting over the last few years? We'll never know the cost.
Yeah.
You did this to save $12 million. Period. End of story. And well, $12 million on Pruitt. You also got to whack Niedermeyer without giving him anything on the down low, but on the way out the door, I should say. But the question that I would have is, was it worth it? We're going to bring that up when all the penalties are dropped in their lap, I'm sure. But as of right now, does it look like it was worth it, Vince? You could have just fired him and said, "Here's $12 million, go away."
Yeah, but that's assuming that none of this stuff comes out anyway. I mean, clearly,
Fair.
We have found out that they weren't very careful or precise about their cheating. So it's going to come out anyway.
But Pruitt would have taken his wife and his babysitter with him. That would have been.
Yeah, I think you're still at risk. And who knows, Niedermeyer, all that. Well, I guess he would have been cleared out too. But I still think you would be running a risk that it would be found out, and then it would be worse than failure to monitor because then you didn't self-report. So.
Fair enough. Good point. The question that somebody put out there, I've seen it on social media, somebody ran it by somebody I know, and that was this: with the NIL world, if the NCAA comes in and says, all right, we're taking away 20 scholarships over the next 4 years, could you just take good players and say, you're not on scholarship this year, you're a walk-on, and here's the NIL dollars to cover your tuition? We know that BYU did that this year where they set a deal where all of their walk-ons are going to get NIL dollars. The problem is, and I went and looked this up, when USC got hit with their 30 scholarships, the NCAA also said, and you're capped at 75 players, period. So if you're sitting there thinking, we can just end around this with the you can't. The NCAA, if they hit you with a 20 scholarship production, they're going to tell you your maximum limit on players that year is going to be X, because they know what you're up to, especially in this NIL world. So I've seen that kicked around. I just wanted to be on the record as saying,
that's a nice thought.
That's highly unlikely.
Other SEC coaches would also say, hey, why don't you go look into this if you tried that?
Yeah. The irony of this is you wanted to get rid of Pruitt, so you dug up all this stuff, and you wanted to work with the NCAA so they would take it easy on you. You worked so well that you handed them a list of 200 violations, more than 200 violations, 17 of them major. To the point, it's almost like I'm turning myself in. Yes, but you're turning yourself in for shooting a guy. You're not turning yourself in for jaywalking. You dug up so much dirt, the NCAA is having to say, well, we can't just let you walk. We appreciate you turning yourself in, but 200 violations and 17 major, we got to hit you. That's the irony of this, is they did such a great job of working with the NCAA, they've left the NCAA no choice but to hit them with a failure to monitor. And I don't know how they get around it. How does Tennessee defend itself against failure to monitor when this is the case?
It's a good question. That's why it hasn't been resolved yet. Probably, right? Because they're fighting that, and I don't know exactly what the argument is. That's why I think if you're Tennessee, at this point, you have to figure out what is our number that we're okay with, and if that's the ultimate penalty here, we take it, we move on, we close this, because while right now football's good and the athletic department's in really good shape, and I agree with Josh Heupel's assessment essentially of it's a speed bump. Mm-hmm. You don't want the speed bumps to continue to be there down the road, so you want to get out of this as quickly as you can.
Here's the thing about that, too. If you had 10 violations, you could probably argue failure to monitor. How do you get away with 200? What were you doing while all these violations were occurring? How could you not have seen or known something? So I don't know how you get out of the failure to monitor.
I think your one defense is failure to monitor is actually failure to make a good hire. I mean, you hired a head coach that absolutely.
I don't think that's going to defend you.
Well, I know, but I mean, you got to come up with something, right? You had a head coach that had absolutely no experience as a head coach, athletic director, no experience as an athletic
NCAA's
director.
not going to give you a break for being stupid.
Well,
You're right. You'll take that back.
But then you
take
also
it back a notch and say maybe you should
and
hire
like
an
I
AD
said
with a
before,
history.
you got to whittle down those 18 violations somehow. Somehow, some way.
Well, it's the 17 because the 18th
okay.
is the fact that you've got 17. It's kind of like you got 17, we got to hit you with the 18th.
Chuck, what you're saying, it's actually makes Tennessee look worse because you're responsible for who you put in place, and I think the NCAA has gone in that direction. Whether you knew about it or not, there's still some responsibility.
Here's also a problem with NCAA precedents. You have different people on committees.
Yeah.
It's like having a different jury. So it's not like, well, they may see it differently than some other previous committee that you have, which is why I've argued for years they should hire a full-time staff of committee on infractions, hire these 10 people, you pay them, and they handle all the cases.
Just like a Supreme Court.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. The problem is with the everybody looks at the NCAA and says, well, it's not fair. It's not the same for everybody. But Jimmy, if you and I and Josh all left here and we all pulled out of this parking lot going in the same direction, driving 90 miles an hour, and we got pulled over by 3 different cops, one of us, Jimmy, might catch a break because I listened to you every day for 20 years.
And that
one
speed
of us,
bump got me.
One of us will get a warning because you're a nice guy. I'd get hammered because nobody likes me. So it would be a different deal because we all got a different cop. And that's the way the justice system works. Maybe it's the judge. Oh, gosh, I got the bad judge. Who'd you get? I got the good judge. So the NCAA isn't going to be consistent. Bottom line is when you turn in 200 violations, I don't know what your recourse is in terms of how are we supposed to monitor? How could you miss that? Again, if that's 200, that was a bump violation. That's a lot of bumping.
I tell you what,
200 bumps.
If it's a speed bump, there's a bunch of potholes on this road too.
A lot of times it's the cover-up that is worse, perceived worse than the actual violations. So that's what they're hoping, that they've avoided and not gone with a cover-up by being so forward with it up front and be cut a deal because of that. That's their biggest defense.
We're about 2 hours over in a 90-minute show, so let's move on. When we come, it's a speed bump. When we come back, ESPN has put out a couple of computer rankings. Some people aren't happy; they think they're lowballing the Vols. We'll discuss that next. Where should the Vols be ranked in these preseason polls? That's next on the Sports Source. Come on back.